Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Krzysztof Jaworski and I welcome you to Security and Development YouTube channel. My guest is Elias Technavi. Nice to have you, Elias.
Thank you so much, dear Krzysztof. A big thanks to our dear audience, friends, colleagues, people from academia, everybody.
We talked several times already, and each of our talks was from the different perspective, analyzing Iran from historic perspective, with parallel to Russian-Polish and Russian-Iranians relations during the centuries. We focused on ongoing events when it comes to regional escalation, and today we are there again to discuss regional conflict and potential escalation to regional or even broader war, which is a very hot topic, as you mentioned before we started the recording. But at the same time, we will try to look at this from this very big picture and try to understand why for US, Iran is so important that they were willing even to make some concessions when it comes to Ukraine, to has Russia as a mediator in their talks with Iran. So, Elias, to start with, could you please tell me and tell us, of course, are we on the brink of war, of regional war, or even worse?
Well, I mean, as you clearly mentioned, this is a hot and dynamic topic, dear Krzysztof. I mean, we are seeing on a daily basis that the chain of events is getting deteriorated. I mean, it's actually a dynamic that is moving towards worse, not towards the better. So, I mean, we turn on the tube and we see, the news of confrontation, that the Americans are kind of transferring their navies, or I don't know, their strategic jet fighters in the Indian Ocean, San Diego Island. So these are all the news of new confrontation, new lining ups, new formations. So speaking from the facts, we can receive two signals. The first signal is that the Americans are taking some preemptive action and deterring action. It's actually some sort of a deterrence by showing all these, war machines, by showing all these capabilities. They're trying to just deter the Iranians from taking further action or from escalating the events. Well, I should say a third scenario because just another option popped up in my mind, and I will also talk about it. And the second option is that they're really thinking about it. That together with the Israelis, they're really thinking about it, that if the negotiations don't work with the Iranian government and the Iranian officials, then we have to take some military measures in order to stop the Iranian nuclear plan by having some limited and constrained operation, actually, not some comprehensive, complete in and out war. Just targeting the atomic sites and just to stop the program. That's what they think. And the third option is the maximum pressure. This idea of maximum pressure was actually an official part of the Donald Trump's foreign policy doctrine or security doctrine. That if we apply and employ the maximum pressure on the Iranian government, then we can force them to have negotiation with us. And at the same time, the Iranian officials from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs have clearly stated that we don't negotiate under maximum pressure. But the reality shows something else. The maximum pressure will force the players, to talk at least, to have the negotiation, because this is the economy, because it is the people, this is the national interest. And regarding your question, if I want to sum up and wrap up my answer, I should say that there is a possibility of military confrontation. The possibility of military confrontation exists based on the ground facts, because the next step is just to fly those jets, or launch the missiles from the Iranian side, or the jets from the American side start to fly, and so I mean, that's the next step technically. So it can be a possibility, a sad possibility, but at the same time, players in international relations are rational actors. They calculate the cost, benefits, and also the loss. So a calculation of these three elements that I just said is kind of determining regarding the military confrontation, because if the loss is more than the cost, is more than the, I mean, advantages, so these rational actors technically don't engage themselves in an overall war. So at this moment, we are dealing with the possibility of a regional confrontation that might spill over to other regions. And when we are having war in 2 regions or 3 regions, then it's going to be a continental war. Or if I want to use other words, it's going to be a world war. And in this global village of information technology, a world war is not something magical or fictional. I mean, it can, these small incidents can easily trigger such a phenomena. So you see, not even a regional war, but a world war is kind of possible.
I think that if we look at war not just as something conventional with kinetic violence, but as a continuum in which we have different types of coercion, we are indeed in the moment of global transforming coercion, or maybe some systemic war. Because if we look at what US is doing, it is going to redefine its term of trades with most of their trade partners. It's definitely type of economic coercion, and in some areas there are this hot wars with guns, with tanks, this traditional wars. So I think these things are interconnected, and I was wondering, and I'm interested, what do you think? Why for US this problem with Iranian nuclear problem is so important, that I think it's part of this systemic balance of power, and it can affect US position in the region, and it influences hugely energy markets. It influences one of important allies of US, Israel. And at the same time, I'm wondering why US is seeing this as a bigger threat than if Russian win to some degree in Ukraine, because Russia used to openly declare that it's at war against NATO, against US, that their goal is to end US hegemony and to destroy the liberal world order, because they perceive it as something which is against their national interest. So I would like to try to understand why it seems that it's more important for US than this Russian threat.
Well, I should say, to jest świetne pytanie. That is a very, I mean, a great question indeed, because you see, Krzysztof, you see, our dear audience, that the Russians are clearly expressing this hateful rhetoric. I mean, they have no shame to, I mean, the Russian government has no shame to express this explicitly. But on the other hand, the Iranians are not threatening the Western, I mean, values, to be honest. I mean, I'm talking non-biased and scientific. They're not, I mean, pointing their guns or pointing, I don't know, their rhetorics towards the system. They just have this ideological adversary with Israel and those who support it. And I can say that the United States is the only country that is wholeheartedly support Israel in terms of weapons, in terms of, I don't know, political support, diplomatic support. So you see that there's a difference between these two countries in terms of threatening the liberal democracy values, because the Russians, from a historical political perspective, if we go through the history of international relations, we can see that the Russians are even more ideologic than the current Iranian regime. They have been like that from the communism time. The United States of Socialistic Republic has been an ideologic empire. They've actually been an ideological empire, and now they have kind of reformed and they have reshaped themselves. But I personally, from a psychological, political perspective, political psychology, field of analysis, I still see that that Putin is thinking about the old age to kind of repeat the lost and forgotten Tsar Empire of the Russian Federation. That is the same ideology that perhaps exists in the mind of some Islamists in Iran, to give life to an Islamic caliphate, or to spread the message of the revolution. So this idea of revolution is common between these two countries. And regarding the nuclear program that you just asked, that why it concerns the Americans so much in this region, I should say that I should start to build on this question from two perspectives. The first perspective is from a theoretical scientific angle, because the United States has been using a systematic system of balancing, offshore balancing, to support the allies in far regions, firstly through the means of diplomacy, and then military supports, financial supports, and then help them to take care of themselves. So the Iranians are not received as friends by the Americans. So there is this threat, there is this, dangerous intentions that exist, because we are seeing that the Pakistanis have nuclear weapons, Indians have nuclear weapons, but they don't concern the Americans, because the Americans don't perceive them to be their enemies. But the Iranians are being perceived to be the Israeli enemies, biggest enemies, and then Americans' enemies, because the enemy of a friend is enemy to another joint friend. So you see, they have a common enemy, the Americans and Israelis. So they're perceived as a threat to the existence of Israel. And if this atomic plan serve the greater goal of creating an atomic bomb, and this atomic bomb is being controlled by an ideological state who's threatening to destroy Israel, then this plan should be stopped. I'm just requoting what the Americans are thinking. I'm just expressing the mind of the American politicians to our dear audience. So that's what they think, because they're perceiving the Iranians to be their enemies. It's actually a war of rhetoric, a war of, narrations, perceptions. When we look at the Korean Peninsula, we see that South Korea and North Korea, the North Koreans are also being perceived as the enemies. The Chinese are neutral to Americans in terms of military and security, because they also have atomic bombs. But the American strategists don't think that the China will resort to its atomic plan and scheme to confront the United States or its interests. But based on the facts and based on the mindset of the Chinese, I personally believe that they will do it if necessary. The Chinese will do it if necessary. And there are some errors. I have to talk about the errors in the American strategist perception regarding the Iranian mindset and perspective, because they're not familiar, though they have so many Iranian studies experts, Middle Eastern experts, but I guess they are only reading books. They're not living with the realities of the Iranian society. But, that's why I'm always insisting on using the experts that are originally from this region or like are in constant touch, because they're not familiar with the socio-political terms and spirit of the society. So when there is this ideology of not using an atomic bomb, and this ideology is imported from top to bottom from the supreme leader, then the country doesn't move towards the creation of the atomic bomb, the construction of an atomic bomb, because there's this ideology. We call it fatwa. That is an executive order, if I want to translate it. So there has been always this executive order or a doctrine, supreme leader doctrine, to not move towards the creation or construction of an atomic bomb. It has religious and ideological roots. Though some people believe that this is a deceive, there's also another narration saying that it's a deceive. But it exists. People cannot question that, because we are dealing with a religious society that is being constructed on religious narrations and rhetorics. So fatwa, or the executive order of a clergy, is really important and crucial. And no one can act upon this executive order. So this is an error. To some extent, a wrong reading of the narration of the Iranian government or politicians when they said that we don't want to create an atomic bomb. But at the same time, there are also some truth. The threshold, I call it the threat threshold or the atomic bomb threshold. The Iranians have already passed that threshold. They don't create the atomic bomb. They don't lie. But they are very clever. So they have already passed that threshold. So they can make the atomic bomb within 1 week or 7 days. So you see, they're honest. But at the same time, they're not. This is really complicated because they don't create the bomb. Yes, they don't have the bomb. But they have the capability of creating atomic warheads within 1 week, 7 days. So on the paper, the media, they're saying the truth. But technically speaking, they're having warheads. They're having the bomb. They've already had the bomb. They have the technology. They have the scientists. They have all the infrastructures. Come on, this country in the Middle East is an atomic power. We're dealing with an atomic power. We have few countries in Europe that are an atomic power. We have France, Germany, United Kingdom, like these 3 or 4 countries in the European Union. But in the heart of the Middle East, you're having, a country that has, so many atomic sites, advanced atomic sites. So this concern exists, that the technicians in Iran have already reached this capability to move towards the atomic bomb. But at what cost? At what cost? This is a very important question. Will the ideology win, or will the real facts win? So we are having a mixture of errors, a mixture of right understandings, and all these errors exist because of a lack of diplomatic negotiation and diplomatic conversation. When you don't have diplomats in both countries, then you cannot read each other correctly. That's why I always said that the communication is the most important media in international relations and even in security studies. Because when you're enemies, you don't talk. You don't know what you're doing. You don't even send correct signals. Like Donald Trump has sent his letter via the United Arab Emirates to Iran, and the Iranians have replied back using another country. So what kind of a communication is that? Come on, are we living in the Middle Ages? Like, What not really?
Maybe we
what
are.
kind of communication is that? I mean, I I have read so many books and I have written so many books. So this part is empty in diplomacy. Indirect negotiation, for the sake of God, Santa Maria. What is indirect negotiation? Like I sit here in this room in a hotel talking to a mediator. Let me tell our audience about this anatomy of indirect negotiation. Like there are the Russians, very good mediator, like they're in mud till here and they want to negotiate between two other countries. I mean, come on, the Russians, peacekeepers. They sit there in the hotel and they're talking with the Iranian delegation and the Americans are in another room. So they talk to them, they convey the message to the Americans and the Iranians leave the hotel. They go to Tehran for consultation. And the Americans then go to Washington, D.C. for consultation. And then they send their answers to this country that is mediating. I don't know which country has yet taken the role of the negotiator in between. Perhaps it's the Saudis, perhaps it's the Russians. We don't know yet. So it's going to take a century for this kind of negotiation to reach the result. I mean, this is not a constructive way of negotiation. And do you know the reason? The reason is that the Supreme Leader has said, we shall not have direct negotiation with the Americans. So this is an ideological order. This is merely an executive order. And the responsible entities and institutions, which is mostly the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, cannot act against this executive order. So they have to construct a new means of indirect negotiation. But indirect negotiation has already existed in the history of international relations and history of diplomacy. It has always been there. I mean, like I was a little bit exaggerating by saying that it doesn't exist. Yeah, it has been there in different times, like in the Cold War, Vietnam War, or Korean War, Chinese War. So we have already seen some examples of indirect negotiation, but the time is really important. We don't have time for an indirect negotiation. Why Donald Trump is explicitly threatening the Iranians of bombing them. That is a serious threat. We've got these strategic bombers in the Indian Ocean. So this is a signal. Why are they being positioned like that? They're not there for fun flyings, actually. Like they're strategic bombers. So they're there for an operation. Of course they're there for an operation. So what are they waiting for? All these navies, these squads, Harry S. Truman or other, naval squads, what are they doing in the Persian Gulf? They're not there to sail for the fun of it. It's really costly for the Americans to send all this military delegation to the region. So they're serving a purpose. I don't like to use this term, but that is a war. That is a warlike military frontation maneuver before the war. Like they're ready to fire. They're ready to fly. We are exactly one stage before the triggering point of a war. Like everything is well formed. This formation is a war formation. If I want to speak military, from a military perspective, this is a war formation. The bombers are strategic B-52 bombers. These are operational, vessels that been sent to the Persian Gulf. And the Iranian missile cities, all the missiles, I guess there was an article from Tehran Times saying that the missiles are ready in the missile cities to be launched. So they have already been locked on the targets. So this is a war formation. And how can countries negotiate under these circumstances? Like, does anybody know how can countries negotiate under such circumstances while the parties are not even willing to have direct negotiation. And Donald Trump has recently stated that the Iranians are willing to have direct negotiation. He said that they have stated that indirectly in their letter. And my final statement regarding your question, sorry, my answer was way long because that was a very crucial question that you proposed.
You covered most of this important parts of this topic, so it was really good.
That's very kind of you, because you really proposed a very excellent question. I mean, that was very crucial. And the last part, which is my answer to your brilliant question, is that the Iranians are trying to buy time. I mean, from a strategic perspective, the Iranians are trying to buy time to see what they can do by prolonging the discussion, because indirect negotiation is time consuming, and usually the countries don't intervene when they're having diplomatic negotiation. Diplomatic negotiation is the first step. Second step is sanction, economic sanction, diplomatic sanction, and then the last step is war. Even the Israelis welcome the diplomatic negotiation. So you see, the Iranians are trying to buy time. They're, obviously trying to buy time and create new schemes, trying to create new plans to see what they can do. Because this is a historical moment. It's really a historical moment. The next month, 2 months, 5 months, they are very, crucial and determining.
I have one reflection to one of the previous parts of your answer. Is about thinking in these imperial categories, and as you talked about this different perception of Russia and of Iran in US eyes, I think it may be that Washington already knows for many years, for many decades, Russia. They were competing, they were sometimes cooperating. USSR was much stronger, much bigger threat for them, and they at least managed to to keep this relation at this Cold War stage, not make it a hot war. So I think it's something known for them, and they feel safer with it, and they thus suppose that they can manage this relation in the way that will make not them lose their power, their position, their interests. And when it comes to Iran, it's some kind of underdog which is trying to achieve more power, to achieve nuclear bomb. They do not consider them as a country which will be as manageable when it comes to having such powerful tool. And at the same time, I think this ideology there is a very important factor. Religion or ideology is something that shapes this perception of threat. And that's what I have in mind hearing your response. And to sum up, I would like to ask you shortly about possible scenarios or trajectories of these events, because I wonder, if we suppose that Iran gets this nuclear bomb, there is not escalation to the hot war and destroying of plants, of installations, how it affects regional balance of power. And if we suppose that there is this attempt to get this bomb, there is escalation, and for example, these plants, these capabilities are destroyed, how far should it go? Is it it will escalate into longer all-in war, or it could end this way? Because as we discussed this few times in our previous talks, you mentioned that Iran is self-constraining. Yes, they are not willing to get into the war which will destroy their society, their country, their economy, and that's why they are at the same time trying to show that they have this strength and to retaliate for and exchange these attacks. But at the same time, it's really self-constraining to not to escalate it.
Well, indeed, I mean that's the point blank. The Iranians are really willing to increase the kind of war of friction or hot war or hard war, let's say, because of the economic condition, because of the social condition. I mean, the society is not welcoming. The society is not. The majority of people are not. I mean, welcoming or embracing a new war, especially with the Americans. On the other hand, they're just trying to say that we have to amend our relation with Americans. This is not a constructive path of avoiding each other. And there are two scenarios. There are actually two scenarios that I want to explain regarding your question. The first scenario is that the Iranians have the atomic bomb. And this atomic bomb acts as a means of deterrence. I'm using the internal rhetorics of the Iranian politicians saying that, look at North Korea. North Korea has atomic bomb, and no other power has the dare to attack the integrity of North Korea. So if we have these atomic bomb capabilities, then we can extend our deterrence threshold. And they won't kind of attack us. So this is the first scenario that is built on the deterrence theory, that they will have a real deterrence. Because prior to this, the Iranians have been benefiting from a shadow deterrence, a term that I call the shadow deterrence. The proxies, the rhetorics of, we will have the capabilities to build the atomic bomb. And the second scenario is an external one. The Americans and the allies will stop the Iranians from moving towards the creation of an atomic bomb. And the third scenario is that they give up. Both parties give up and given some points in order to reach a compromise via diplomatic negotiation. Because, bombing the sites won't stop the Iranian nuclear program, to be honest. This is, we say that in political science or social sciences, we should not be 100% sure when we say something. But according to the facts, according to science, this is not possible to destroy this plan by attacking the sites. If I want to talk about the military, impossibilities of these actions, that most of the sites are being constructed under the mountain, between mountains, and Iran has a very, eye-catching strategic depth. There must be complicated fueling operations on air. So many jets, squads must be kind of departed and dispatched towards Iranian air territory, aerial territory. And so, it's gonna be very expensive, very risky, and it requires a long operation, not just 1 day or 2 day operation. And the Iranians will retaliate. That's another aspect of this complication. We're not dealing with Syria. We're not dealing with Yemen. We're not dealing with even Iraq in 1991 or 2003. We're dealing with a middle power. So they will retaliate. I'm not saying that they will have celestial capabilities. I'm not saying that the Iranians have celestial or extraordinary abilities, but they have the ability to retaliate. And that's what concerns the Americans and their allies. Because they don't have the capabilities to attack the American soil from the heart of the Middle East. They cannot do it. But they can harm the Americans' interest. The Iranian military camps, the American allied countries. So, this is another possibility that concerns the Americans. It's a right concern. So, everything is interconnected. No parties want a full war, and I personally believe that Trump is actually putting the pressure on the Iranian side to start the negotiation, to do the negotiation. He doesn't want war. He doesn't want to just, because it's going to be a direct war for the Americans after a long, long time. So after the, Iraq invasion and after the war in Iraq, after some 20 years, 22 years or 20 years, it's going to be another new confrontation. So I don't think that the Americans at this moment want a new confrontation, while China on the other side of the globe is progressing in terms of economy without entering any kind of conflict or war. And speaking of economy, the Americans don't want to have more inflation, because now they're having also a trade war. They have already started a trade war with all the countries. With all the countries. So it's gonna actually add to the inflation, it's gonna be a nightmare for the parties involved. So while the possibility of war exists, it's not 100% true, and it's not inevitable. Some people say it's inevitable that eventually they will have military confrontation. I don't think so. I don't think that's going to be, 100% inevitable. They can have diplomatic negotiation. They can use deterrence. They can even use this, offensive rhetorics to show their capabilities to other parties. And finally, the people of this region, Middle East, are tired of wars. It's really an endless loop. It's an endless loop for this region. I've always said, if we have peace in the Middle East, then we have peace in the whole world. So I really hope for that day.
Thank you for our talk, for analyzing in depth this framework of thinking about the possibility or the threat of regional conflict and escalation between Iran, between Israel, between USA, and analyzing the role of Russia in this. I agree with your conclusion that while it is really, it's really risky now, because a lot of steps were already taken, like forming war formations on both sides, like having this kind of ineffective talks, with this indirect talks. At the same time, these interests, which we as well defined of both sides, are not to escalate to hot war, but to manage this different perceptions of risk and different interests in diplomatic way. So Elias, thank you very much for this insightful talk. I hope that our audience will comment, will engage in discussion. I'll ask you to subscribe, to comment our materials, to share them, and thank you very much for being with us. Thank you, Elias.
Thank you so much, Krzysztof, for inviting me over. It's always a pleasure. It's always a insightful discussion we're having. We actually try to simplify the international relations, and we try to use the theories and to analyze the real world events. I hope that our audience find our analysis beneficial, because this is a platform and a media that they can learn the theories in action. So I encourage our students, our friends, to subscribe to the channel, to share it, and also to watch it thoroughly, to learn more about the real world analysis and learn how to use all these theories that they have learned in their academic circles to learn more about the world events and everything. And thank you again once more, dear Krzysztof. You're doing a great job, and I hope that we cover more dynamic topics in the future for our audience.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you.